Before Prohibition, Maryland was the third largest liquor producer in the U.S. In a state with so much history, the entire industry was decimated. But as it so happens, there is hope.
So we have a little bit of rum here.
Oh, sun, won't you shine on me? Won't you shine on me when the rain has come?
We wake up on an all but abandoned beach at Assateague National Seashore. There are wild horses freely roaming the island, which sits just about 10 miles away from Ocean City.
But we are heading 3 hours northwest to the birthplace of Natty Boh, Babe Ruth, and the Star-Spangled Banner, Baltimore.
So we are at Fort McHenry. It's right outside of Baltimore, Maryland. And when Francis Scott Key wrote the Star-Spangled Banner, he was a prisoner on a boat out in that water, and he was looking at this fort and that flag, which is just insane to think about. Needless to say, I'm pretty certain that he probably needed a drink after that experience. I know I would. I know I do, actually. Chris, let's get a drink.
And drink we shall as we make our way to St. Michael's, Maryland.
So we are in St. Michael's, Virginia. No, Maryland.
We are in St. Michael's, Maryland. It's been a long couple of weeks. We are headed to Lyon Distilling Company.
I was a home brewer in college and I worked for a little brewery distillery right after college.
It's what he always talked about constantly.
Yes.
The best job he ever had. Ben has this awesome background in brewing and distilling. I worked at bars throughout, high school, college, and after that. So we had kind of opposite sides. He had the know-how down, and I had the people side of it and working with people and cocktailing. We wanted to make something that, one, we both liked, but that we also couldn't find anywhere else. So the biggest compliment that we get all the time is people say, wow, your spirits don't really taste like anything else. And if you're gonna make something, why aren't you gonna make something that's wildly different and that there's a need for?
Lyon Distilling is an extremely small shop that sells out of booze almost every week. They are a true craft brand, and they do everything by hand.
Ben is a competitive sailor, and Jamie a photographer. Or at least they were. Now they are up till 4 a.m. distilling some of the finest pirate fuel that has ever crossed our palates.
There were a lot of tobacco farms out here, and so rye was the cover crop that they would use to sort of replenish the soil's nitrogen content over the winter. And of course, some of that rye would get plowed under, the rest they would harvest, and they had all this surplus grain. So what do we want to do? Let's make whiskey. So we're sort of getting back to that, which is really cool. I mean, mashing is a fairly basic, fairly standard process. But in terms of the distillation, in that sense, we've sort of taken a step back because we use the pot stills, and that's one of those crucial elements in our whole process that really is even less common amongst distillers because it's massively inefficient, but it does produce a whiskey profile that you just can't fake.
After a couple runs to the small pot stills, the booze can be proofed down and bottled.
When we say everything is done by hand here, we mean it. So.
The rye will be aged in a new 1-gallon oak barrel, and the rum will be in a 3-gallon bourbon barrel with French oak sticks.
So this is the Sailor's Reserve. This is the white rum that we place into 3-gallon bourbon barrels that we get from Yellow Rose Distilling. The next thing that I do is I put a couple of French oak staves in there, so you get a little bit of spice in it. This one's a great nose. You definitely pick up that bourbon influence. Yeah. But then you get some of those spices coming through, and then the finish definitely gives you that molassesy.
Very much so. Butterscotch kind of.
While Ben keeps the stills, Jamie does everything else. And as the president of the Maryland Distillers Guild, she is rebuilding the industry as a whole in this state.
The thing is, we're trying to build an industry here in Maryland.
Yeah.
So being the only distillery distilling in a state is cool for a minute until you realize nobody knows what's going on in that state, and we want recognition from Maryland. So if you want to come to Maryland, open a distillery and make good booze, I will buy it and drink it and support you. And that's part of what our guild has done, is trying to foment this Maryland distilling community. But the thing that gets under my skin is small distilleries that open and don't do it right. They're either blatantly copying, they're making spirits that taste like crap, they're not putting their heart into it, they're lying about what they're doing, they're sourcing and making it seem like they're distilling. That gives all of the industry a bad name. Because if you go out and you buy a bottle of craft rum, whiskey, gin, etc., and it's not good, it's not what you were sold it to be, then you're less likely to pick up my bottle.
The first rye whiskey distilled in Maryland in over 42 years. This is a little bit of it, and this is sort of the culmination of all that hard work. So
You can wait.
yeah. And so we call it the Free State Rye. Maryland was notorious for, during Prohibition, never ratifying any Prohibition legislation and sort of refusing to enforce any of the liquor laws at the time.
That's great. That's I mean, because you know how stills kind of have a signature?
Correct.
And so obviously you have your molasses in here, you make the rum, and so it almost has kind of like that. It doesn't have the harshness to it at all.
Right.
It's got the sweetness to it that kind of, I think, comes from being around rum and being friends with it. All right, we're gonna make the Blonde Booze Hound cocktail. So for it, we're gonna use an ounce of the make whiskey, and we'll do an ounce of the aged rye. We'll do some fresh squeezed juice from half a lime, then a couple ounces of pineapple juice, about a spoonful of demerara sugar, half ounce of Benedictine. We're gonna shake it and strain it. Just strain that over this ball of ice. And it's nice and foamy on top, so we'll garnish it with a little bit of bitters. It's really nice. There you are, the Blonde Booze Hound cocktail.
I mean, being the Blonde Booze Hound, my standards are high.
Yeah, I know. It's pineapple.
It's fantastic.
Before the greatest booze drought in this nation's history, Maryland was a proverbial wonderland of alcohol. Fortunately, there are two patron saints of rum and rye in the Free State. Lyon Distilling may be small, but they are pioneering a new era of craft distillers. Also, their booze are freaking fantastic. Toodles.